Hi, this is Jessie Czebotar, and this is part of my new series about the structure of the system, contracts, governments, jurisdictions, and authorities of the Luciferian Brotherhood and the Sovereign Military Order. In this first course, which is called Structures of the System, I really want to bring out a lot of the symbols within that world of the sovereign military and the Luciferian Brotherhood. Symbols mean something. They are the geometrical, the mathematical, the scientific, and the spiritual truths of God, the spirit world, and how those interface with the physical world. In this course, we're going to look at the structure of the system in two parts. The first is its government side at the upper levels. The second part is going to be the breakdown of the structure of the sovereign military order. And let's get started with that. Let me pull up here a whiteboard. So when we think of the system, for me, it's easiest to explain that system in two parts. And to do that, I'm going to use two symbols here that you'll see used a lot within the system. These symbols are part of their seals, and a seal is something that they're going to use as a key or as an access point. It's going to inform you of certain information. You'll see these two symbols used a lot, both the triangle that faces up as well as the triangle that faces down. And sometimes you'll even see these two symbols blended together, which is a common seal that's used and placed on many of their teaching books and different materials. And when you see this seal on a book, it means that there are hidden knowledge, hidden truths of the system within that book. So beyond the words, there's other things, other information that they're trying to have hidden within that book, that only those who know how to read that hidden information are going to understand what's being communicated. So these are known as the triangle that points up is known as a holy contract, and the triangle that points down is known as an unholy contract. So that's how they're going to see those. So let's look at first, over here, we're going to look at first the government side of the Luciferian Brotherhood. How this breaks down is that at the very top of the system, you have a spiritual being that oversees this entire government. That being is Lucifer, or also called Satan, the same one that scripture talks about who was cast out of heaven. So he's at the very top, and with him, you have demonic generals. That's what I call them. And, you know, this structure is going to be in service and in contract with Lucifer and those demonic generals. They're going to be directly communicating with him. So how he set up this system was that at the very top, Lucifer communicates directly with 5 women that are known as the 5 mothers of darkness. One of those women is known as the Queen Mother of Darkness. That was the position that I was chosen to take as a child. The other four of those mothers are going to be in charge of different quadrants of the system. So, if you think of, let's just say, like a map of the United States, and then you have other countries over here, how the system breaks down is by quadrant and region. So each of those mothers will be assigned to a specific quadrant, whether, and that's going to be internationally, but they also will be in charge of a regional contract, either internationally. Let me take that back. The mothers will have both the international quadrant. They're also going to have a regional quadrant, both internationally as well as in the United States. With the Queen Mother of Darkness, her job is to oversee the running of the entire system for Lucifer. Three of those mothers are going to represent Isis, the goddess Isis. So in that, you're going to have a crone, they'll call them a crone, a mother, and a maid. So you're going to have different representations with those mothers of darkness, a little bit different roles that they're going to play. Now, their job is kind of to be like the CEOs of the system, overseeing how their quadrants and the regions within their quadrants are working. Now, each of these mothers are going to be directly in charge of those who are next in line, which are the councilmen. And the councilmen are kind of like your board of directors for a company. And their job, is going to be to oversee a quadrant either internationally or within the United States. And there's over 300 seats on the council. The main council is usually called the Satanic or the Druidic Council. It also can be referred to as the Global Federation, the Federation Alliance, the Global Alliance, the Universal, government. You've got within there the United Nations, other groups that are going to form that are part of that Satanic Council. Now, within that, you also have a special councils that are kind of off to the side. In the regular council, you've got the 300 seats, but you have one position that oversees and runs the council. That top seat is known as the Phoenix of the council. Up until May of 2021, the Phoenix of the council was George Soros. In May of 2021, Soros stepped down, and that's when we saw Barack Obama take his position as the end-time Phoenix of the council. Now, his job, beyond overseeing the running of the council, is also to usher in the New World System, the Leviathan system, or the system of the beast. Up until this point, the entire governmental part of the system was known as the Babylon system. And it was recognized by the color blue, and it was overseen by the Vatican and the Holy See. A lot of the things that we're going to get into in these videos, we're going to see, what the old system looked like and how they broke it down, how they governed quadrantly and regionally. Part of the Phoenix's job now is, as the Babylon system is being destroyed and falling down, his job is to raise up that system of the beast, which is known as the Judas system. It's recognized by the color red, and it's overseen by the Sanhedrin, which that's why when we see this seal of the holy and the unholy contract, that's the same seal that we see on the flag of Israel, because that's the seal that the Sanhedrin operate under, and those are the spiritual contracts that they operate under. So on the side of the main council, you have the special chambers. The head person overseeing the special chambers is a woman by the name of Somerset Belanoff, the cousin of Queen Elizabeth. The special chambers operate or are known by odd numbers. So you have like the Council of 5, the Council of 7, the Council of 9, which is also known as the Ninth Circle. The Council of 7 is also known as the Ennead, which is an Egyptian bird god. You have a lot of connections to the Audubon Society with that special council. Then you also have the Council of 13, the Council of 11, the Council of 21. So the jobs of the special council is that, you know, if there are things in the region or quadrant within the council that can't be resolved, you know, that the council members can't come to an agreement on a matter, they're going to call in the special council chambers to deal with those matters and to make final decisions in the outcomes of those matters. So that's kind of how that operates. So underneath the councilmen, you've got your next leaders, and these leaders are going to be at a quadrant level. You're going to have your grand high priests and priestesses. So each of those grand high priests or priestesses are going to be assigned to a quadrant, either internationally or within the United States, and they'll oversee, you know, the governance of this understructure here within the quadrant that they're assigned. Now, a lot of them you'll know because they'll be the ones connected to elite mansions or, castles in the area. For example, some of the grand high priestesses that I worked with were out of the Eastern Quadrant here in the United States, and we had individuals like Gloria Vanderbilt and Lori Cabot Kent. You also had in the Western Quadrant, you had Joan Collins. So those are some of them. Some of the grand high priests that I worked with, we had John O'Brennan, who was head of our CIA, who was in charge of programs, projects, and experiments with the U.S. military and Central Intelligence out of the East. And then you had Colonel Michael Aquino, who was head of the Department of Defense, who was over projects, programs, and experiments in the Western quadrants. So that's kind of how some of that breaks down. Underneath them, then, you have, underneath the grand high priests and priestesses, you have those that are known as high priests and priestesses. So high priests and priestesses are going to be assigned to a region. So let's just say, they're connected to southern regions. That region's going to be broken down, like within the United States. Usually regions are broken down by state and by counties. So high priests and priestesses are going to be assigned to one region, and their job is to help oversee and run the departments of the system that are operating within those regions. The departments regionally are broken down into 5 departments. First, you have the Masons, you have the Mormons, Then you have, let's see if I can do this here. You have the Jesuit Catholics, and you have the Satanists. And fifth, you have the Kabbalists or the Kabbalah. So, you've got the Masons, the Mormons, the Jesuit Catholic, the Satanists, and the Kabbalah. Now, the job of these departments within the regions is twofold. First, their job is to oversee the system's assets. What are assets? Assets are pretty much the children, the drugs, the money laundering, and you've got the buying, selling, and trading of quantum identifiers on the black markets. But, just looking at their assets, when they're overseeing the children, you've got the children split into two groups. First, you have the hierarchy children. Those are going to be children that are chosen for a position in the system. So they're going to be trained, programmed, MK Ultra'd to take that position. When their time is done. Most training for these positions begin around age 4.5, sometimes earlier, but pretty much the hierarchy kids are going to be bloodline kids that are born, to do something in order to keep the system going. It doesn't mean that they're all going to fall into this upper hierarchy structure of governance of the system. It could be as simple as, that they're chosen to be a secretary at the Catholic Church, or they're chosen to be a school teacher. They're just chosen for some job that is going to keep the system going all together, right? So the second group of children are those that the system call the expendable children. And I don't believe that any child is expendable, but that is how they refer to these children. These children are pure assets to them. First, they're going to be sold for sex. When they can no longer be used for sex, they're going to be chosen for satanic ritual sacrifice and murder. They're going to, when that child's no longer usable, there's going to be a bid that goes out, and people are going to bid to be able to satanically, ritually sacrifice and murder that child. That could include that they're going to cannibalize the child. Oops, let me respell that. So that children will, die somehow, whether it's being cannibalized, whether it's through satanic ritual and murder, they'll take that child's life. But that's not the end of their profit then. After that, they will take the remains of the child and they will incinerate those remains and pressurize those remains into diamonds. So they will bid more money in the elite world for those diamonds. The person who's bid the highest, they can choose to keep that as a trophy diamond, or they can sell that diamond on the black market. Why the diamonds? It's because they get dimensional access through those diamonds. And so a lot of times those diamonds will be used in ritual sex magic. If they're not used, or let me restate that, whatever is left of those remains is going to be sold. The ashes will be sold to our food companies and our pharmacia as filler. And so, we have a huge profit that comes, off of these children in the system. And these are the 5 departments that are overseeing both the hierarchy and the expendable children and the profiteering that comes off of that. So as we get into this further now, I want to look at the next part of the structure of the system, and that's their sovereign military order. The sovereign military order also is broken down into different parts. At the very top of this structure, you have those that are known as protectors. Their job solely is to, be assigned to the elite, this upper governmental level, and so they're going to provide the protection. The protectors come from, legendary families. They are born, they are bred, they are specifically chosen within their family to make a contract with certain familiar spirits that come down or have contracted with that family for generations, that give them special abilities and powers and authorities. And, their job is to provide protection for the elites. They're also going to oversee the management of safety and protection for rituals or high-level events for the elite. They'll do, secure the perimeter surroundings for those events and rituals. They're going to also be in charge of moving assets for rituals. So, they'll be the ones bringing in children for sacrifice. They'll also be the ones overseeing the cleanup after sacrifices and making sure that nothing remains, that could be incriminating for anybody among those elite. So there's a lot that the protectors do, and those events beyond rituals, it could be, they're all engaging in sex magic, so they will oversee orgy events as well. Underneath the protectors, and so the protectors can be assigned to anywhere. Their permanent, their rotations, their service is going to revolve around these upper level elite and what's needed either quadrantly or regionally. Underneath them, you have those that are going to, oversee the sovereign military order at a quadrant level. And you'll notice that these quadrant leaders in the sovereign military, they'll be identified by this symbol, which is a line, and it has 3 crossbars through it. This is a very specific contract within the system going back to Solomonic magic. A lot of the Solomonic magic will be identified by what looks like 3 Roman columns or 3 Roman colonnades or just simply 3 lines. This is a base 3-line contract with this middle line being so much more than the average person could imagine. What does this middle line, or what do these 3 pillars represent? This middle line is the same thing we would see, in Kabbalah, as you've got the tree of life or the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You might see that with, like with an angel with wings up here, showing upper level ascension. You might see a symbol down here with dragons' heads on it. But what contracts does this represent? Within this system, we have demonic generals, and the easy way to understand this is through a couple symbols. First, we see that middle line contract. This we are going to read like a clock, with the 12 o'clock being up here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Up here at the 12 o'clock, we have a certain principality, and you might notice this diamond part of this as I start to do this out as the Kabbalah ladder. It can also be symbolized as a tree, you might also see, what looks like a cross, um, the layman, the Rosicrucian cross, and forgive me, I'm having a really hard time here drawing a rose. But if you imagine all this with a rose here, um, the Rosicrucian layman, all of these symbols are the exact same thing. They're just based on the department of the system. They're symbolized differently. Why? Because they want you to believe that they're all separate religions. They don't want you to see all of this as a system or understand, that their symbols represent certain contracts, and they're all the same contracts, just represented in different forms based on how, that circle group or that department decides that they want to display that contract, right? So up here at 12 o'clock, you have the spirit Abaddon. Let me see if I can, let me draw it just a little bit further down here so you can see a little better. So up here at the 12 o'clock, we have Abaddon or Apollyon. At between the 1 and 2 o'clock, we have Baal. At the 3 o'clock, we have Molech. At the 4 o'clock, we have Baphomet. At the 6 o'clock, we have the only spirit that is not bound by earth and who has full control over all the waterways, and that's Leviathan. At the 7 to 8 o'clock, we have Azazel, who is, scripture tells us he's chained at the Euphrates River. At the 9 o'clock, we have Thoth, and between the 11 and the 12, we have Samael. And right smack dab in the middle of all this, we have Ashtaroth, who's also known as Ashtoreth, as Jezebel, as Lilith, as Artemis, as Diana, any female goddess, Isis. Really, who's behind that is Ashtaroth. So when we see these symbols, this straight line is basically, it's our base contract with these principalities. You have at the top of that straight line, you have Abaddon. In the middle of it, you have Ashtaroth, and at the bottom of it, you have Leviathan. Even when we see it as the Kabbalah tree of life, you'll see here, you'll see a man. Here, you'll usually see a woman in that contract, and the woman will be standing in between two areas. Why do they have it? Because you've got a contract between Ashtaroth and Leviathan for the waterway of the womb. So that's why that symbol is there. So all of this means deeper things. Now, when we see the lines, like, if we see two lines, this top line is an extended additional contract with Samael, between him, Abaddon, Ashtaroth, and Leviathan. And then the secondary line here is a contract with one of the commanders under Samael, known as Asmodai or Asmodeus. So you've got some additional contracts there. And then even this third, when you see an additional third line there, that's a whole nother spirit that we're not even going to look at right now. So basically for this position here under the protectors, you have your quadrant leader in the system, which is known as the Supreme Preceptor. And you'll recognize them by that symbol because they're going to have that quadrant jurisdiction, and these are the spirits that they're contracted to, and have authority under. Underneath the supreme preceptors, you're going to have those who have regional rule, so they'll be assigned to one quadrant, and they're going to be assigned to a specific region within that contract, and they're just going to be called your preceptors. Then underneath the preceptors, you have those who also are going to be assigned regionally to one region, but they can move. They can be placed in other regions, but you're going to have your sovereign military knights groups. And there's a lot of different knights groups. At the quadrant level, you're going to see your Knights of Pythias. You have your Order of Jerusalem knights that work specifically under the Vatican. Now, all of these knights groups have their own symbols. They're known by their crosses. So you can identify, like the Knights of Jerusalem, they'll have more of a short cross, kind of like what you would see with the Red Cross symbol. But you're going to see these 4 little crosses, around it like that, and you'll see little headers on the sides there. That's your Order of Jerusalem. Or so they're going to be, directly under the authority and jurisdiction of the Vatican and the Holy See. You also have like your Knights of Malta. You know them by, they're more of the shorter cross. Oh, sorry, I didn't do a very good job with that one. Like the Red Cross symbol is what you're going to see with them. It could also be white. Besides your Knights of Malta, you also have your Knights of the Bath. They're known by a symbol that looks like a belt buckle or a Q. You have your Knights of the Garter, which are seen, and the Knights of the Thistle, which are primarily identified by their green cloak that they wear. Like you see Princess Anne, the sister to King Charles, whenever she shows up in her royal array, she has the green cape, representing that she's a commander over the Knights of the Garter and the Thistle. There are so many, you get your Knights of the Rosy Cross or Rosicrucians, you get your Royal Arch degree. So you have a vast number of knights, each one going to be known by their cross, and you can search Knights Templars crosses and see the different ones, find the different orders. So basically what you have happening is that, these knights are going to sit in circle groups, and they can be in as many as they want. So that's where they can get moved to different regions, different quadrants. They can be operating, going from one to another based on what circle groups they're connected to, what authority and jurisdictions they're given, and what their job is within the system. With that, they're going to all start off with base degrees, and how the degrees work is that basically you have your 1st through 3rd degrees are your recruitment stages up to Master Mason. So the 3rd degree is going to be known as a Master Mason. Now, after that, the majority of these individuals are not going to identify themselves as Masons. They will begin to identify themselves based on their specialties and their degrees of illumination. So after the 3rd degree, you move to degrees of illumination, which run by these numbers: 15, 30, 60, 90, 180, and 360. 360 means that you are fully illuminated. And sometimes you'll see things like you'll see like the 33rd degree, you know, or you'll see like there's 65 degrees, or, you know, or you'll see like 47, right? What does that mean? Well, like when we see a base degree like 30 and then you've got a number 3 on it, that tells you that they're working towards something. It tells you about their contracts. So basically, you know, a 33rd degree means that they're going, you know, they're going to be in their degrees of illumination, but they're still also going to be connected to the sovereign military knights groups and to those contracts. So the simple cross is known as third, a third place there in the contract world. And how do you get that 3? Well, you've got, you know, the threefold contract with Abaddon, Ashtaroth, and Leviathan. So that's how they're going to identify themselves, is that, you know, based on that threefold contract. A number 5 is going to represent preceptor contracts, that you have, you know, Abaddon, Ashtaroth, and Leviathan, but then you also have that the 2 crossbars being a contract with Samael and Asmodai, so you have 5 base contracts there. The number 7 is going to identify at a supreme preceptor level, because you have the 7-fold contracts, the 5 we mentioned earlier, plus you have like this space that is vertical in between that 3rd cross and the 2nd cross line. That's another commander. And then you have that 3rd cross line, which is still another commander yet. So you have 7 contracts within that. So that's how they're going to identify themselves. You know, a 40 is just going to mean that they're working between, they're somewhere between that 30 degrees of illumination and 60 degrees of illumination. And all of the degrees of illumination really get down to one thing. It gets down to energy and their ability to control energy and electricity. And so, you know, degrees of illumination are connected to their abilities in magic to create art. And where are they at in that? That's going to be identified by these numbers. So that's the basic breakdown of the structure of the system. I hope you're enjoying this. We're going to get into a lot of other topics, breaking down the authorities, the governments, and understanding, you know, how they use these symbols, where we'll see them, and what the different contracts mean, as well as, you know, what magical books are they working through that are connected to those contracts. So join us for the next course in this series. You can find all of these materials on kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. Thank you.